So what happens when you die? Is that a little too broad or too deep for you this morning? Let's narrow it a little bit. What happens to your assets when you pass away? Well, that's still a little broad. We might be talking about grandmother's crystal, the family dog, or your retirement plan assets. So let's focus on those retirement plan assets. And to do that, let's illustrate that with a story. Let's assume you have one son, and we'll name him Chris, because Chris is generally a handsome young guy. Very nice son. So you've passed away, and Chris is obviously in mourning, and one day this package arrives, and he opens it up, and it's probably about as thick as a telephone book. And on top of it, he reads the cover sheet and finds that he's just inherited your IRA worth $500,000. Now, Chris is distraught from your passing, but he's starting to feel a little bit better. So, Chris starts wading through this paperwork, and man, he gets lost in all the attorney jargon that's in there and has no clue what he's supposed to do. So he sees the 1-800 number at the top, and he gives them a call. And after he fiddles around and presses 1 and 2 and 4 and 8 a few times, he finally gets to a person, only to find out that that person can't give him any advice for liability reasons. So he's a little frustrated. He says, hey, I can go to the internet. I can get any answer I want there on the internet. So he Googles inheriting an IRA. Unfortunately, he gets 8 pages of Google advertisements with people wanting them to invest online with them, and they have the next great whiz-bang invention. So he keeps searching, and eventually he finds an IRS publication, and we all love IRS publications. So he looks through it, and as he reads through all the attorney speak, he finds out, hey, I can distribute this, take that money, pay some taxes, and move on down the way. And then he starts reading through the other options and just gets lost in all the bean counter talk and says, you know what, I've got some bills on the counter, I have a young daughter in the room back there. This $500,000 would sure go a long way to help those things out. So he quits reading, digs through that stack of paperwork, fills it out, and sends it off. And a few weeks later, he has a nice, handsome check on his mailbox. Unfortunately, tax time comes around, and old Uncle Sam's there to harvest his part. And if we assume that Chris has, let's just say, $100,000 of taxable income, that $500,000 just got stacked right on top of it. So now he's going to pay an additional $140,000 of taxes this year. Now you have just rolled over in your grave because you spent 30, 40, 50 years putting a little portion of every paycheck away, sacrificing, and your kid just gave away $140,000 of that to the government right off the bat because either one, they didn't want to go seek financial advice, or they were too lazy to do all the research they needed to do. So this is pretty unfortunate, but Chris doesn't mind. Here he's sitting, what does he have, $360,000? He's pretty happy. He hasn't done anything wrong. But had he gone and spoken to an advisor, he would have found out that rather than the one option he utilized, he had 3 options. So his first option would have been lump sum, which obviously we know about. His second would be 5-year deferral. And his third would have been what they call a life expectancy method. Well, the lump sum is exactly like we explained. You take the check and you run. You pay Uncle Sam, of course, but you throw all that money away and you go on down the road. His second option, which is actually what the IRS assumes everyone is going to do from the get-go, is 5-year deferral. Basically, the way the 5-year deferral works is you roll it over into an inherited IRA and you let it sit for 5 years. You don't touch it. And at the end of the 5 years, old Uncle Sam comes knocking on the door, and hopefully during this time that's appreciated a little bit. If you inherited a few years ago, you're not real happy. But let's say it's appreciated a little bit, and now you've amassed enough money to pay the taxes off and still inherit the $500,000. And the way the numbers work, it generally works out pretty close to that. So that's a much better example. You're a little bit prouder of the kid. Hey, they put off a little bit, and they still got the amount of money that you left for him. But the final example is a little more complex, but oftentimes we find is the better example, and it's what they call the life expectancy method. And it works just like it sounds, because no one in here knows when they're going to die, but the IRS will certainly tell you when you're going to die. So you can go and look at your age. And let's say for this example that Chris is 40. So Chris looks at the table and the IRS says, hey, 43.6 years, that's when you're going to kick the bucket. So Chris takes his $500,000, uses the divisor of the remaining life expectancy, and finds out he has to distribute a little bit over $11,000 this year. Now from Chris's point of view, he gets 11 grand extra this year. It's not going to raise his taxes, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I would sure appreciate an extra $11,000 this year. I can think of a few things I would want to do. And then the rest of that money gets to grow on to next year. And next year, he knocks a year off of that divisor. He gets a little bit more money back. Still not enough to hurt his taxes too much, and it rolls on down the road. And for the next 43, 44 years, he gets to do that every year until that account is distributed. And over time, that distribution just continues to build and continues to build. And the good thing about this is, that's the minimum he has to distribute every year. So at any point, say that daughter decides to go on off to college, he can distribute the tuition that year as long as it's more than the minimum. The IRS is happy. He goes on down the road and still has some money aside. So now that money that you left for him is growing and amassing over time. It's now helped pay for their grandkids' college tuition and anything else that he needed. And the way the numbers work, there's a number of variables in there, but generally the projections we run find that the child ends up netting about double what they inherited over that time frame, based on several different variables. So now we find that Chris has just thrown away several $100,000 because they didn't want to go spend a few dollars or whatever the fee may have been to seek financial advice. The really devastating part of all of this is, had he come to our firm, we don't even charge for simple questions like that, because from our point of view, that's just run-of-the-mill, everyday things we answer. So next time you find something question that comes up to you that's a little bit unfamiliar to you, go to the internet. It's great. Do your research. That way when you do go seek out that advisor, you've got a little bit of background to educate yourself to know which advisor to select, but still go out and seek that advisor, because you never know what the cost of that advice really is going to be for you. That'll toast me.